Thank you for joining me for today's episode of Once Upon a Crime. As I wrap up 9 seasons, 9 years, and over 350 episodes of this podcast, I'm reflecting on what I've learned about the criminal mind. I began this podcast as a way to dive into the psychology of crime and criminals. It was a hobby of mine that I decided to study formally, earning an advanced degree in the subject. Like many people, though, I found a wealth of material on this topic in the stories of the world's most infamous serial killers. I read the biographies and researched the crimes of perpetrators like Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, and Eileen Wuornos. Never satisfied with the general knowledge found in most accounts of these infamous individuals, I researched these stories to uncover what we didn't know about them, or perhaps what we had never even considered. It's easy to get caught up in the mythology of serial killers. These are our real-life monsters, the ones that haunt our dreams, keeping us awake at night, wondering if we've double-locked our doors, the boogeymen whose names we utter as cautionary tales for our children. But although they are certainly dangerous, they are nevertheless only human, and perhaps not as large as life as we make them out to be. In this episode, I'll have you consider one such boogeyman, Dennis Rader, aka BTK. Well known across the globe as one of the most infamous and enduring killers in American history, his crime spree spanned over 15 years, with 10 suspected victims. Yet, as I researched his crimes, I noticed that far from being a criminal mastermind who meticulously planned and carried out his nefarious deeds, Rader was a bumbler. His plans rarely came together as he had expected, and many of his crimes were botched, messy, and chaotic. He seems to have evaded the law not because of his brilliant criminal mind, but because his random sloppy attacks seemed unconnected. Because of this, investigators believed they were searching for multiple killers, not just one. This is the story I'll share with you today, the story of Dennis Rader, the bumbling serial killer. Serial killer Dennis Lynn Rader was responsible for at least 10 murders between 1974 and 1991 in Kansas. A married man with 2 children, Rader maintained the facade of a responsible church-going family man while secretly stalking, torturing, and killing his victims. He operated primarily in Wichita and Park City, Kansas, where he also lived with his unsuspecting family. Throughout his killing spree, Rader sent a series of taunting letters, poems, drawings, and stolen items from his victims to police and local media. Among these disturbing packages were bound and gagged Barbie dolls, symbolic of his twisted fantasies. Early on, he gave himself the moniker BTK, short for bind, torture, kill. Rader fancied himself an evil genius, more intelligent than the police, local investigators, and even the FBI agents who were desperately trying to identify and capture him. But in reality, Dennis Rader was one of the most incompetent, bumbling serial killers on record. Nearly every crime he committed was riddled with glaring mistakes and stunning lapses in judgment. So how did he evade capture for nearly 2 decades? I believe the answer lies in a combination of timing and circumstance. First, Rader began killing before the term serial killer had even been coined. Second, law enforcement was still in the early stages of understanding how to investigate these kinds of crimes. Third, the FBI's emerging profile of serial murderers at that time was based on common traits that Rader simply didn't fit. And finally, Rader was so inept at executing his plans that his intended pattern often fell apart, making his crimes appear random and unconnected to investigators. Let's now explore the story of one of America's most foolish, yet undeniably dangerous serial killers. I call this episode BTK Blunders. Before Dennis Rader became known to the world as the BTK killer, he was just a man with a disturbing fantasy, and very little clue how to act on it. In 1974, Rader made his first attempt at abduction. He'd been obsessively watching a bank teller stalking her for weeks. One morning as she arrived for work, he made his move. Wearing a ski mask, he forced his way toward her car. But she fought back. She screamed, kicked, struggled, and Rader panicked. Instead of following through with his plan, he mumbled an apology. He claimed he was a wanted man who just needed a getaway car. Then he fled. After that humiliating failure, Rader avoided the bank altogether. He made up excuses to his wife each time she asked him to run an errand to their bank, all the while simmering with frustration. It became clear to him, abducting a woman off the street was just too risky. His fantasy, modeled after serial killer H.H. Holmes, of imprisoning victims in a torture dungeon inside a barn, would have to wait. He needed a new plan. He shifted his focus to target a victim in her home. He began stalking Julie Otero and her young daughter, Josie. Rader watched the Oteros for weeks. He learned their routines. Julie's husband, Joe Otero, usually left by 8 a.m., dropping their older kids off at school before heading to work. That left Julie, Joseph Jr., and little Josie alone at home. Rader planned to strike during this window, kidnap Julie and Josie, and take them somewhere private. But like everything Rader did, the plan quickly unraveled. On the morning of January 15, 1974, Rader parked near the Otero home and walked through their neighborhood. He hopped the fence into their backyard and cut the phone line. As he moved towards the house, he noticed paw prints in the snow. The Oteros had a dog. Problem number 1, he hadn't planned for a dog. Problem number 2, the garage where he intended to ambush Julie was open to the street, fully visible to neighbors. He started to second-guess everything. Maybe he should just leave. But then, it was too late. The back door swung open. Joey Otero, just 9 years old, stepped outside to let the dog out. The dog barked, alerting the family. Rader had to act fast. He entered the home with his gun drawn, expecting to confront Julie and her 2 youngest children. But within moments, Joe Otero, Julie's husband, appeared in the kitchen. Another surprise. Joe had recently been in a car accident, and his car was in the shop. He was home from work, recovering. Now Rader wasn't facing 2 victims. He had 4, and no real plan for how to control them all. Somehow, brandishing the gun, he managed to subdue them. He tied them up using cord and tape, securing them to bedposts. But he quickly ran out of bindings. He hadn't anticipated needing so much. He hadn't even put on his mask. Originally, Rader hadn't planned to kill them. He wanted to abduct, not annihilate. But now they had seen his face. He felt he had no choice. One by one, he began strangling them. Joe Otero was first. Rader discovered that strangling a grown man was much harder than he imagined. It took longer, much longer. And Joe didn't die the first time. Neither did Julie. He had to try again, reapply pressure, wait, and check for life. Again and again. Eventually, he killed Joe and Julie, followed by their son, Joseph Jr. Then he took 11-year-old Josephine to the basement. There he tortured her, strangled her, and sexually assaulted her body after death. The scene he left behind was horrifying. Before fleeing, he grabbed a few items as trophies, including Joe Otero's wristwatch. He tried to clean up the scene. It was the middle of the day, and he knew he could be seen at any moment. Rader stole the Otero's car, but it was nearly out of gas. As he backed out of the driveway, 2 witnesses saw him. They later gave police descriptions of a man driving the Otero's vehicle. Rader ditched the car in a nearby alley. But just as he thought he was in the clear, he realized something devastating. He'd left his buck knife behind, the one he had used to cut the phone line. In a blunder that defies belief, Rader returned to the crime scene to retrieve the knife. It may have been during this second visit that one of the witnesses saw him again in the Otero's car. Let's take stock of just how badly he botched this crime. He hadn't planned for the family dog. He assumed the man of the house would be gone. He was seen twice driving the victim's car. He ran out of cord. He had no real strategy to control 4 people. He didn't anticipate how difficult it would be to kill someone by hand. And of course, he left his weapon behind. This was Dennis Rader's first known murder, and it was a mess. A clumsy, chaotic, terrifying mess. Yet somehow, despite all the blunders, he got away with it. For now. Let's be honest, parenting in the digital age is not for the faint of heart. The youth mental health crisis is real, and social media isn't helping. The average teen now spends 9 hours a day glued to a screen outside of school. That's mind-boggling. I used to be in the classroom teaching high school students, and even then, it was a daily battle to get kids to put down their phones and focus. And as a parent, the struggle doesn't stop when they get home. We're expected to monitor screen time, block inappropriate content, and somehow still keep our kids connected and happy. That's why I was honestly relieved when I found Gab, the only tech company actually solving this problem with parents in mind. They call it Tech in Steps, and it just makes sense. The right device at the right age. My grandkids aren't quite teens yet, but we've already started using the Gab watch. It has GPS tracking and safe zones, which means that I or their parents can check in at any time. The kids get that little bit of freedom they've been begging for safely. No social media, no random YouTube rabbit holes, which helps parents sleep better at night, knowing our kids are protected. For my niece, who's in middle school, my sister got her the Gab Phone Plus. It has monitored texting, video calling with family, and even music. Clean music only. The best part? The Gab Smart Filter. It blocks harmful content before it ever reaches her phone. It's like parental controls done right. And for teens who are ready for more, Gab offers a powerful smartphone with the premium features they want. Think a high-quality camera and a curated app store, but still under a parent's control. It's tech they're excited about, and protection we can trust. Here's the truth. Gab isn't just giving kids a phone. They're giving parents a real plan to grow with. And when the time comes for my kids to level up, I already know the next step will be safe, age-appropriate, and not a free-for-all. If you've ever wondered about what your kids are exposed to online or how much time they're spending there, take a deep breath. Protecting your kids has never been easier. Right now, you can get the best deals at gab.com/once. No contracts required, just peace of mind. That's Gab, GABB.com/once. Terms and conditions apply. I'll admit it, my dog is spoiled. Benji is a French bulldog, and he's Mr. Personality. You may have seen his photos and videos of him on my social media. He's my constant companion, my partner in crime, and he's pampered like a prince. I can't help it. He's the best. However, he can be a bit high maintenance when it comes to mealtime. Not only is he plagued with skin allergies, but he has a sensitive tummy, and to top it all off, he's a very finicky eater. So I've tried every dog food on the market. Fresh, frozen, kibble, canned, you name it. It got expensive, and Benji, he still wasn't impressed. That's until I found Spot and Tango. Spot and Tango's Unkibble is everything kibble isn't. It's made with real human-grade ingredients, and it's personalized for your dog's needs. I was so pleasantly surprised to find that Benji loved Spot and Tango's Unkibble. Now, not only do I not have to hassle at feeding time, but I've also noticed that Benji's allergies are better. He no longer licks his paws, and he's less itchy. And no more upset tummy. Spot and Tango creates a customized plan for your dog based on its age, weight, breed, and activity level. They even send a pre-measured scoop, so you'll know exactly how much to feed your dog. Benji's a happy pup now that he's gotten a bowl upgrade with Spot and Tango. And your dog can be too. Upgrade your pet's bowl with Spot and Tango's Unkibble. For a limited time, go to spotandtango.com/once and use code ONCE to get 50% off your first order. That's spotandtango.com/once, code ONCE, to get 50% off your first order. spotandtango.com/once and use code ONCE. 3 months after the brutal slaying of the Otero family, Dennis Rader was ready to strike again. This time, he'd picked a woman named Catherine Bright, a 21-year-old Wichita resident who lived alone. She seemed like the perfect target, young, single, predictable. Rader's plan was simple: knock on her door, force his way in, and take control. But like most of his plans, things went sideways almost immediately. April 14th, 1974. Rader walked up to Catherine Bright's door and knocked. No answer. No one was home. So he broke a window at the back of the house. But then, as he often did, he panicked. What if she came home, saw the broken glass, and ran before he could act? He needed to pivot. He cleaned up the glass, wiped away prints, and crawled inside the house. Then he hid in the bedroom, waiting for his victim to return. He had his .22 caliber pistol in his hand. Suddenly, it went off. A loud pop echoed through the house. It wasn't the first time this had happened. The .22 had accidentally fired once before during a break-in. Rader would say the weapon had a hair trigger, but he liked it. It was easy to aim and light to carry. Still, that shot could have blown his cover before the attack even began. As he calmed himself and decided where to wait, he heard a car pull up outside. It was Catherine, but she wasn't alone. A young man was with her. Rader's heart dropped. He had studied Catherine. He knew she lived alone. This wasn't supposed to happen. Just like the Otero murders, he hadn't planned for another man. But the clock was ticking. As they opened the front door, Rader stepped out with the .22 in hand. No ski mask, he hadn't put it on. Why would he? He planned to leave no witnesses. The young man with Catherine was her 19-year-old brother, Kevin Bright. Rader forced them inside and corralled them into a bedroom. He had no restraints. He'd failed to bring any, either out of forgetfulness or arrogance. Perhaps he believed he could control his victim easily and without restraints. But now he was forced to improvise. He rummaged through the house and found nylon stockings and scarves to use as bindings. He first had Kevin tie up Catherine. Then Rader tied Kevin's hands and secured his legs to a bedpost. He took Catherine into another room and bound her to a chair. He turned up the volume on a nearby radio so Catherine couldn't hear what was happening in the other room. Then he returned to Kevin and began to strangle him. But Kevin fought back. He broke free of the bindings around his legs and leapt to his feet, hands still tied behind him. Rader panicked. He shot Kevin in the head. Kevin collapsed. Rader went back to Catherine, who had already loosened her restraints. She fought him hard, but eventually she began to lose consciousness under his grip. And then Rader heard a noise. Kevin wasn't dead. When he rushed back into the room, Kevin was on his feet again. He'd broken his wrist bindings. He charged at Rader and grabbed for the .357 Magnum that Rader had holstered at his side. The two men struggled, wrestling for the control of the weapon. Kevin's fingers were on the trigger. Rader, terrified the gun would go off, broke away and fired his .22 into Kevin's face. Kevin dropped again. But the nightmare wasn't over. Catherine was still fighting. The gag her attacker used on her had come loose, and she was screaming. Rader sprinted to silence her, tried to strangle her again, but she wouldn't stop struggling. Having totally lost control now, blood pounding in his ears, Rader drew an 8-inch buck knife and began stabbing her, again and again. There was blood on his hands, on his shirt, on his shoes. When Catherine finally went still, Rader heard something that chilled him. The front door opening. Kevin Bright, shot twice, once in the head, once in the face, was gone. He caught a glimpse of the bleeding young man fleeing down the street. Rader was covered in blood and exhausted. A witness was loose. He ran. But not before indulging in one of his compulsions. He rifled through Catherine's purse and took her driver's license. He always took a souvenir with him to better relive his horrible deeds. He grabbed 2 sets of car keys and tried to steal the pickup truck parked in the driveway. Neither set worked. So, drenched in sweat, bloody, and panicked, he ran over a mile back to his car parked at the Wichita State University campus. It was a miracle he wasn't seen and reported by an alarmed or even just curious citizen. Kevin Bright, barely alive, ran to a neighbor's house. They called 911. Catherine was still breathing when emergency crews arrived, but just 4 hours later, she was dead. Kevin survived, and he remembered everything. He described his attacker in detail, a white male about 25 years old, 5'11", stocky build, dark hair and a mustache, and, quote, sweating profusely. The police sketch drawn from his memory was uncomfortably close to Dennis Rader. Even Rader himself admitted it. Now he was terrified. He'd murdered 5 people in just a few months, including women and children, and yet somehow still hadn't been caught. But with a surviving witness and a police sketch that looked a little too accurate, he was sure the knock on the door was coming any day. So he hid his murder kits and souvenirs at his parents' house. He burned his collection of bondage magazines and S&M paraphernalia. He tried to lay low. He experienced many sleepless nights. But days passed, then weeks, then months, and nothing happened. No arrest, no questions, no knock on the door. Dennis Rader started to feel cocky. 6 months after killing Catherine Bright, he decided to taunt the police. Disguising his voice, Rader called a local newspaper columnist and instructed him to visit the public library. There, hidden inside a book, was a letter. In it, he took credit for the Otero murders. The bumbling serial killer was furious that police suspected 3 other men. He wanted them to know who was really responsible. He ended the letter with a chilling sign-off. Quote, "The code words for me. Bind them, torture them, kill them. BTK." The BTK killer had officially introduced himself to the world. A month later, Rader was hired by ADT, a home security company, where he began installing alarm systems in Wichita homes. Fitting work, considering he had just made the city terrified of opening their front doors. For the next 2 years, Dennis Rader went quiet. He was busy with his new job and preparing to become a father. But BTK hadn't retired. He was just waiting. Three years had passed since the botched murder of Catherine Bright and the miraculous survival of her brother Kevin. And in that time, Dennis Rader had tried to live a normal life. He was working full-time at ADT, installing alarm systems in the homes of frightened Wichita residents. Ironically, many of them still reeling from the Otero and Bright murders. At home, his wife Paula was pregnant again. But beneath the surface, Rader's violent fantasies were bubbling over. The compulsion was back, and stronger than ever. He wanted to kill. He needed to kill. But when it came to executing the perfect crime, Dennis Rader had a big problem. He was awful at it. Spring 1977. Rader spent weeks stalking potential victims. 3 separate women had caught his eye. He'd cased their homes, learned their schedules. But every time he tried to strike, something happened. The first woman came home early while he was outside cutting her phone line. Spooked, Rader ran off. The second time, a neighbor's dog barked as he crept up to a house. He bolted. Then there was a time he arranged to meet a single mother who had posted an ad to sell a trailer. It was all set. But when he showed up that day, in an ironic twist of fate, a sniper opened fire from a window at the Holiday Inn in downtown Wichita. Police descended on the area. Rader called off the hit. So much for meticulous planning. And yet, on March 17, 1977, things reached a boiling point. Rader had set his sights on a Wichita State University student where he himself was still taking classes. He'd been following her and knew her schedule. That day, he knocked on her door on Hydraulic Street. There was no answer. Frustrated, desperate really, he got back in his car and drove around aimlessly. Then he saw something that caught his attention. A little boy walking alone down the sidewalk. Shirley Vienne, 24 years old, was homesick with the flu. She'd sent her 6-year-old son to the store to buy a can of soup. He was on his way home when Rader approached him. Rader, ever the deceiver, showed the boy a photo, a picture of his own wife and daughter, and said he was looking for this woman and her baby. The boy said he didn't know them and kept walking. Rader watched him go inside a nearby house. That was all the opportunity he needed. He waited a moment, then knocked on the door. The young boy answered, now joined by his 8-year-old brother. Rader pushed his way in, flashing his .357 Magnum and carrying a small zippered case. Shirley emerged from the bedroom, wrapped in a robe, clearly ill. Rader told her calmly, quote, "I have a sex problem." He said he needed to tie her up, but he wouldn't hurt her or her children. The children, terrified, began to cry and scream. This made Rader panic. He blurted out, "This isn't going to work." So he changed the plan. He herded the children into the bathroom, locking them inside. He placed toys and blankets on the floor to calm them. But they kept crying and pounding on the door, shouting for their mother. Back in the bedroom, Shirley, weak, sick, and horrified, vomited. Rader was flustered. Things were spiraling again. Still, he pressed on. He tied her up with cords and tape from his briefcase. And when she was restrained, he placed a plastic bag over her head and suffocated her. But once again, Fate stepped in. The telephone rang. Rader froze. He'd thought about killing the children like he had done to Josephine Otero, but the ringing phone scared him. What if someone came by to check on the sick woman? Time was up. He grabbed his tools and fled. Moments later, the 8-year-old boy broke the bathroom window and escaped. The children ran through the house, saw their mother's lifeless body, and then ran to a neighbor's house for help. Rader had waited more than 3 years to kill again. He spent months fantasizing about the perfect victim and the perfect crime. And yet, when the moment came, he chose a sick, bedridden woman at random, whose young children were home and able to identify him. He later said that Shirley Vianne, quote, wasn't even his type. This wasn't fantasy. This wasn't control. It was chaos. As much time as Dennis Rader spent obsessively preparing for his attacks, stocking up on cords and duct tape, planning entrances and exits, when he was confronted with the real thing, his decisions were impulsive, reckless, and sloppy. His inner urges always overwhelmed his so-called planning. The perfect crime? Far from it. And it wouldn't be the last time BTK let his delusions of control devolve into total panic. I have to tell you about the face cream I've just started using. It's called La Pure, and it's made with beef tallow. I know that may sound kind of wild, but hear me out. It's seriously the best thing I've ever put on my skin. I was delighted to discover La Pure's beef tallow face cream. My skin had been so dry and flaky since winter. After trying it, I was hooked after just one night. My face felt soft, not greasy, just nourished. And it's not just for your face. I tried it on this dry patch on my elbow that nothing else was fixing, and it was gone in 2 days. La Pure's beef tallow face cream is totally natural. Like real ingredients your grandma would actually recognize. No weird chemicals, no 10-step routine. It's made in small batches with essential oils and beeswax, so it smells like nature, not perfume. And get this, it even works for babies. That's how gentle it is. If aging and wrinkles are your worst fear, you're going to want to try a skincare routine that's both effective and cost-effective. You don't need the 10-step process. All you need is La Pure Naturals Beef Tallow Face Cream. It's crafted in nature, featuring ingredients like grass-fed beef tallow, colloidal oatmeal, raw honey, and aloe vera. And it's got a wonderful natural citrus scent. Save 40% today on your first order when you visit lapurenaturals.com/once. That's lapurenaturals.com/once for 40% off your first order. You can grab the link in our show notes, as well as all our sponsored discount codes. I don't know about you, but I feel like daily life is getting a bit chaotic. Work, school, chores, kids, pets, all your responsibilities can come at you fast, and sometimes it's hard to unwind. This can wreak havoc on our physical and mental well-being. One thing that can help to relieve mental stress as well as physical aches and pains is Cornbread Hemp's CBD gummies. Cornbread Hemp's CBD gummies use only the best part of the hemp plant, the flower, for the purest and most potent CBD. They're formulated to help relieve discomfort, stress, and sleeplessness. And they come in amazing flavors like blueberry, blood orange, peach, and watermelon. Not a fan of gummies but still want the benefits? Cornbread Hemp offers an impressive range of topical CBD products. Their creams and balms are blended with organic arnica, peppermint, lemongrass, and eucalyptus oils for powerful plant-based comfort. I take a break from writing and recording by going on some pretty strenuous hikes. I love it, but it takes a toll in the form of sore muscles and feet. A little Cornbread Hemp CBD lotion or balm rubbed into those tired muscles gives me quick relief and a good night's sleep. Right now, Once Upon a Crime listeners can save 30% on their first order. Just head to cornbreadhemp.com/once and use code ONCE at checkout. That's cornbreadhemp.com/once and use code ONCE. By the end of 1977, Dennis Rader had murdered 6 people. But to hear him tell it, the first one that really counted, the one that finally lived up to his grotesque fantasies, was Nancy Fox. A 25-year-old secretary who sang in her church choir, Nancy lived alone in a small duplex in Wichita. She was a planner, a creature of routine, and that made her the perfect project for BTK, or so he thought. Rader had been stalking her for weeks. He learned her schedule. He knew she came home around 6 p.m. each night after work and choir practice. And on December 8, 1977, Rader set his trap. He knocked on her door. No answer. Nancy wasn't home, so Rader broke in anyway. He cut the phone line, his signature move, and began preparing for her arrival. But before he could even settle in, the front door opened. Nancy walked in and saw him. Now, here's where things get strange. Nancy didn't scream. She didn't run. She just stared at him and told him to get out of her house, over and over. She was startled, confused, but not immediately terrified. Rader stood frozen. This wasn't part of the script. He began his usual spiel to try and gain control of his victim. He was sick. He had a sex problem. He said he just wanted sex. He'd tie her up and take her picture. Then he'd leave. Nancy, still calm, lit a cigarette and sat down. He had a gun. She knew she couldn't fight him. She said, "Let's get this over with so I can call the police." But then she noticed his gloves and the handcuffs, and her tone changed. "This is ridiculous," she said. "This is bullshit." That's when Rader lunged. He began tying her up with rope. He said he'd leave after it was over, and that she'd be fine. It was a lie. With her bound, Rader wrapped a belt around her neck and began strangling her. Unlike his earlier murders, the messy, chaotic, botched scenes, this one went smoothly in Rader's eyes. There were no children in the house, no unexpected visitors, no barking dogs, no gunshots. No one got away. This, he would later claim, was his first successful kill. He stayed in the house for a while, looked around, adjusted things, and took some mementos. Then he left. But he wasn't finished. The next morning, still euphoric from the murder, Dennis Rader did something unthinkable. He walked to a payphone near the corner of Central and St. Francis Streets and called 911. He told the operator there was a murder and gave them Nancy Fox's name and address. Then he hung up the phone and left it off the hook. But the 911 operator stayed on the line. An off-duty firefighter picked up the receiver and gave a general description of the caller. White male, maybe early 30s, dark hair. It wasn't enough to identify the man. Still, Rader had made a huge mistake. For the first time, his voice was now on record. The audio was played on local news programs. Rader, sitting in his living room, listened. Each time he heard the recording, his stomach twisted. Would someone recognize his voice? And the mistakes didn't stop there. He couldn't resist writing about his crimes. He began crafting a poem about Shirley Vian, his previous victim. But one day, while typing it out, his wife Paula walked in on him. Panicked, Rader stuffed the poem into a chair cushion and forgot about it. Later, his wife found it. When she confronted him, he claimed it was a creative writing assignment for his administration of justice class. I kid you not. He said they were studying BTK as a class assignment. She didn't ask any more about it. Rader reworked the poem and mailed it to the newspaper as a Valentine's message titled Shirley Locks. The public could have their sentiments published in the paper on special occasions for a small fee. But Rader, perhaps a cheapskate, didn't include payment for his Valentine's message. It was never published. Instead, it was tossed into a dead letter file. Rader was furious. He craved attention. He wanted credit. So he escalated. He wrote a second poem, a longer one, and this time he made sure there was no doubt about who sent it. He called it Ode to Nancy. The 2-page letter sent to the paper included a drawing of a woman bound and gagged, presumably Nancy, and was signed not once, but 4 times with the letters BTK. Each signature was accompanied by a hand-drawn noose. And just in case that wasn't clear enough, he included a sketch of a bound and gagged woman. He was done playing games. He wanted credit. He wanted infamy. And now Wichita knew BTK wasn't going away. By the spring of 1979, Dennis Rader was still riding high on the thrill of killing Nancy Fox, his so-called perfect crime. He hadn't murdered since, but the hunger was returning, and this time his sights were set on someone new, Anna Williams. She was 63 years old, a widow who lived alone in a modest home in Wichita. Rader began quietly watching her, following her routines, studying her schedule, peering through her windows. He believed her to be the perfect target, and he thought he had her all figured out. April 28, 1979. Rader picked this night to make his move. He broke into Anna's home, cut the phone line, and settled in to wait for her return. He'd brought a rope, a mask, and tape, all the tools of his fantasies. But there was one problem. Anna didn't come home. Not at 9 p.m., not at 10 p.m., not even at 11. She had been out with friends, later than usual, and when she finally arrived home, it was nearly midnight. By then, Dennis Rader was long gone, frustrated, humiliated, and once again denied by circumstances beyond his control. To appease himself, and so the night wasn't a total loss, Rader rummaged through Anna's house, taking jewelry, money, and a few personal items. But he wasn't done. Weeks later, he mailed a package, first to a local TV station, and then directly to Anna Williams herself. Inside the box were items that had been stolen from her home. There were drawings, his signature crude sketches of a nude woman bound and gagged. There was also a poem, a chilling, childlike rhyme. "Oh, Anna, why didn't you appear?" It was a twisted taunt, a letter from a killer who had broken into her home, waited in the shadows, and left furious that he couldn't claim her life. For Anna, it was terrifying. She packed up and left Wichita entirely, disappearing from Rader's reach, and making it clear she would not be the next victim. But the package also gave police something new to work with. The postal clerk who accepted it described the man who dropped it off. It was enough to generate a general profile. For the first time, investigators began to notice patterns in Rader's communication style and materials. One clue came from the copies he sent. Rader had originally sent handwritten or typed notes, but after the Anna Williams letter, he made a change. Photocopies only. He believed this would make it harder to trace the materials back to him. But meticulous detective work revealed something critical. All the BTK letters, poems, and drawings had been photocopied using two specific machines, one at the downtown Wichita Public Library, and another in the Life Sciences building at Wichita State University, where Rader was a student. The circle around BTK was tightening, slowly, painstakingly. But it hadn't closed. Rader would lay low for several years. And he wasn't finished, not even close. By 1985, Dennis Rader was living what appeared to be a normal, stable suburban life. He was a father, a husband, and a Cub Scout leader. He was the president of the church council at Christ Lutheran in Wichita. And of course, he was BTK, a serial killer with an ego almost as twisted as his crimes. The FBI had begun to develop profiles of men like him, killers who operated in patterns, who spiraled out of control, who grew bolder and more reckless with time. They coined these perpetrators disorganized serial killers. Rader took this personally. He read the articles, watched the news. The experts said serial killers were usually loners, unmarried, unemployed, that they didn't stop, and that they didn't kill close to home. So Rader decided to do just that, to prove them wrong. Her name was Maureen Hedge. She was 53, a widow and a grandmother, and she lived just 6 doors down from Dennis Rader's home. They had spoken many times. He'd wave when she walked past. She knew him as a church-going family man. She had no idea she was being watched. On April 26, 1985, Rader was on a Cub Scout camping trip with his son. But sometime during the night, while the other chaperones and boys slept in their tents, he slipped away and returned to Wichita. He broke into Maureen's home expecting her to be alone. But once again, his timing was off. She wasn't alone. Rader hid in a closet as Maureen returned, accompanied by a man. He waited silently, cramped and sweaty, while the couple talked, laughed, and eventually fell asleep. Only after the man left and Maureen had gone to bed did he emerge. He strangled her. Then, in a grotesque act that would become central to his secret life, he placed her body in her own car and drove her to his church. The same church where he was a leader, where he shook hands with parishioners on Sunday mornings. There in the basement, he posed her corpse, photographed her, and acted out the fantasies he could never quite control. When he was done, he dumped her body in a ditch northeast of town. Before sunrise, he was back at the Cub Scout camp. The perfect father, the perfect monster. A year later, BTK struck again, but this time the facade of control began to slip. Vicki Wegerle was 28 years old, a mother of two, married, musically talented, and well-liked. Rader disguised himself as a telephone repairman, carrying a clipboard and wearing a hard hat. He knocked on her door and said he needed to check the lines inside. She let him in. Her toddler played nearby. Once inside, he drew a gun and forced her into the bedroom. He tied her to the bed, telling her, as he always did, that he only wanted to rape her. Vicki fought back, hard. She managed to break free from the bindings. She scratched him, bit him, and kicked. And Rader, enraged, struck her repeatedly in the face. What was worse, her 2-year-old son witnessed the attack. Eventually, he strangled Vicki to death with a pair of her own pantyhose. He took photos of the body, stole her car, and drove off, leaving her toddler alone with her corpse. What he didn't know was that Vicki's husband had seen his wife's car driving away just moments earlier. He hadn't recognized it because a man was behind the wheel. Rader had succeeded in killing again, but this time the rage had overtaken the ritual. The attack was sloppy, rushed, and filled with anger rather than cold calculation. And for the next 17 years, Dennis Rader disappeared from the public eye. He seemed to vanish, but the monster didn't go away. He simply went to sleep until something woke him. And in 2004, the world would hear from BTK again, and this time it would be his undoing. For nearly 2 decades, Dennis Rader vanished. No new murders, no letters. BTK became little more than an unsolved boogeyman in Wichita's past, a horror story parents whispered about, a nightmare that many hoped had simply died out. But in 2004, on the 30th anniversary of the Otero murders, Rader couldn't resist the spotlight any longer. He wanted credit. He wanted attention. He began sending taunting packages to media outlets and police, dropping them in parks, attaching them to signs, hiding them inside cereal boxes labeled with messages like, "BTK is back." In these packages, he included photographs of the crime scenes, copies of his letters from the 70s, and in one chilling delivery, a Barbie doll posed like one of his victims, with ropes around the neck and hands. He even mailed a letter to the local newspaper, the Wichita Eagle, claiming responsibility for Vicki Wegerle's 1986 murder, a crime many thought was unconnected to earlier attacks. That confession helped connect the dots. But it was his ego, once again, that finally did him in. Rader, corresponding with detectives, inquired whether they could trace a floppy disk if he sent one. He actually wrote, quote, "Can I communicate with floppy and not be traced to a computer? Be honest." And the Wichita police did something brilliant. They lied. They told BTK, yes, it was totally safe. No, they said, we can't trace a floppy disk. So he mailed one. Police quickly pulled the metadata off the disk. It led them to a deleted Microsoft Word document with the name Dennis. It had last been edited at Christ Lutheran Church. A simple Google search linked Dennis Rader to the church. From there, detectives obtained a warrant to gather DNA from a medical test his daughter had undergone years earlier. The DNA was a familial match to the semen found at BTK crime scenes. On February 25, 2005, they arrested him. Dennis Rader, BTK, had finally been unmasked. In interviews and courtroom confessions, Rader portrayed himself as a mastermind, a man living a double life, methodical, intelligent, a predator in control. But the truth is far less impressive and far more pathetic. Rader was not a criminal genius. He was lucky. He botched murders constantly, arriving when his targets weren't home, being scared off by barking dogs, nearly being seen by witnesses, even leaving his own voice on a 911 call. He wrote poems like a teenager and hid them in the cushions of his furniture. He posed bodies in church basements while wearing a Cub Scout leader badge. And in the end, it was a Word doc on a floppy disk that brought him down. Not cunning, not brilliance, just ineptitude, arrogance, and dumb luck. Dennis Rader was never hiding in the shadows. He was hiding in plain sight, behind a name tag at ADT, a church pew, a PTA meeting, a scout campfire, and family photos. And the only thing more terrifying than his crimes was how ordinary he seemed. That will do it for this episode of Once Upon a Crime. This episode was a creative retelling of a past bonus episode I shared with my Patreon members. If you'd like to become a member for more bonus content like this, as well as monthly videos, ad-free versions of all our episodes, and discounts on Once Upon a Crime merchandise, go to patreon.com/onceuponacrime to find out more and join. Thank you so much. Once Upon a Crime is written and produced by me, Esther Sanchez-Ledlow. My executive producer is Lorena Garcia. Don't forget to get your CrimeCon UK tickets at crimecon.co.uk and use my discount code ONCEUPON for 10% off. And I'll see you in London next month. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for documentary-style videos of our episodes. Look for Once Upon a Crime podcast on YouTube or get the link in the show notes. Until next time, be good to one another.